I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another live edition. It is March 11th, 2014. Tonight's live edition, I'm going to be getting into a few different things. Hour number one, I have a guest on. And then hour number two, I'm going to be getting into a few different things, including the weirdness surrounding the missing 777 and a few other things. But that's for hour number two. Anyway, hour number one, I want to get right to it because I have a guest waiting on the line. I want to give you a little bit of background about my guest. And I want to tell you what we're going to be talking about tonight. You've heard me talk about the tyranny, the food tyranny that is happening, the food freedom tyranny, where people have everything from hog farmers to like raw food collectives being raided at gunpoint, SWAT team style. Get on the ground, you food terrorists. You could have Al Qaeda in that kale. It's just ridiculous. I mean, we've gone off the chart. So there was a farmer named Mark Baker, and this goes back a couple years, and he had hybrid pigs that he was raising, and there's more to it, and I'm going to let my guest get into it and give you a little bit of background and then tell you what's been going on. And I want him to also tell you all a little bit about the Legal Defense Fund, the Farmers Legal Defense Fund, which I'm going to get into in a minute. But in this one case, this farmer, Mark Baker, was being harassed for 2 years, and he was involved in a protracted court battle. And finally, I was actually surprised at this, but a judge has been, taken his side, and he's ordered, pretty much the Department of Natural Resources to leave this guy alone, and that he is, a legitimate farmer. But I'm going to let my guest get into it. So let me introduce my guest to you all for this evening. His name is Peter Kennedy, Esquire. He's the president, founding board member of Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. The Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. I like the name of that. I like the sound of that. Pete Kennedy is an attorney in Sarasota, Florida, who spearheads the work of the Farmer to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. He began his work starting with dairy issues, particularly the right of farmers to distribute raw milk and raw milk products direct to consumers. I agree. There's no reason that the farmer shouldn't be able to sell it. There's no need for this bureaucracy middleman. Today, the fund works on a diverse array of right-to-farm issues, everything from oyster farming on public lands to free-range pork and farm-buying club raids. He has represented or assisted in the representation of dairy farmers facing possible state enforcement action in Florida, Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. He has helped farmers get started in the business of distributing raw milk and raw milk products in many other states. He has written articles for Wise Traditions Journal and opednews.com on the interstate ban on raw milk products for human consumption and the legality of selling raw milk interstate for animal consumption. He compiled the state raw milk laws and state raw milk summaries posted at www.realmilk.com. He is currently working with others to challenge the federal ban on interstate shipment of raw milk for human consumption. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome to the broadcast Peter. Peter, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Popeye.
So let's get right into it. What's the background story on Mark here? Why were they harassing him with his pigs to begin with?
Well, they were basically harassing him for exposing a scam. What happened, Popeye, was for a number of years, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources had been trying to get rid of these hunting preserves that exist in Michigan and offer wild hog hunts on enclosed properties. The reason they're doing that is it's basically competition to the Department of Natural Resources, DNR. DNR collects fees by having people hunt on public lands, and the people hunting on these preserves weren't giving them a dime. And what finally changed things around for them a bit was they were able to get the support of the Michigan Pork Producers Association. And the support of the pork producers just got them the political muscle to be able to issue an invasive species order. I think it went into effect. They issued it, I think, in 2011. And what the order said was that feral swine, Russian boar, Eurasian boar, among other species, were prohibited under this invasive species order. Possession of them was prohibited under the invasive species order. For a violation, there could be imprisonment for up to 2 years, and I think it was a $20,000 fine. So basically, what I've been told by Mark and the other heritage hog breeders is that all pigs are descended, all species of pigs in this country are descended from the Eurasian boar. So there's this group, the Michigan Animal Farmers Association, that wanted clarification. So as is their right under Michigan law, they asked for what's called a declaratory ruling, asking the Department of Natural Resources to further explain what exactly this invasive species order meant. And the DNR in December 2011 issued this declaratory ruling, just basing whether a pig was illegal or not on its physical characteristics. Under the declaratory ruling, if a pig had a straight tail, it could be prohibited. And if it had a curly tail, it could also be prohibited. And there were 8 different characteristics listed, and actually a 9th characteristic that were basically, the DNR said any characteristics we're not aware of this time, but we discover of at a future time, can also be added to this and used to ban any pig. And there's actually a Michigan animal industry law which bases on a determination on whether a pig is feral just on the fact of whether it's under the husbandry of humans. If it's running outside containment, it's a feral pig. And under Michigan law, I think can be shot on sight. But that wouldn't have worked for the DNR because these hunting preserves, like I mentioned, are contained. They couldn't use that definition. It wouldn't enable them to put the hunting preserves out of business. So they use this definition based on physical characteristics. And just when Mark was crossbreeding these Russian boars along with the these Mangalitsa pigs, and he knew this was going to affect him directly. He went, sued the DNR about a little over a month before the Invasive Species Order went into effect. Shortly after he sued, DNR filed a countersuit, just asking that Mark's asking the court to issue an order having Mark's pigs being destroyed and also fining him. And this case, like I said, I think started in February 2012, and it went, it's still active actually, but Mark was, after 2 years, he was finally going to get to his day in court. The trial today was actually supposed to be the first day of the trial. And here we have DNR saying for 2 years that his pigs were illegal. And at one time, they were actually asking the judge to fine him $700,000, which would be $10,000 for the pigs, $10,000 per pig out of the pigs they'd identified as being illegal. And just to put that in perspective, Mark's attorney, Michelle Hawley, checked all the records to see if anyone had ever been fined that much. And there was, the only case you could find was just this farm, which was a massive polluter over a number of years, like a 10-year period or more. Only that farm had ever racked up that high a dollar figure in fines. The other thing, while this case was ongoing, that DNR did was Mark had a big restaurant business selling pork to restaurants. DNR met with USDA, or just worked something out with USDA, where USDA would not allow Mark to have his pigs slaughtered at a USDA facility. It just seems like they went to the slaughterhouse operators and just let them know that they couldn't slaughter the type of pig Mark was breeding. So that cost him a ton of money. If he couldn't use the USDA slaughterhouse, he could not sell meat to restaurants. He lost a lot of other restaurant business in the meantime. And anyway, after 2 years of just asking the court to get rid of the pigs, to fine him all this money, shortly before, I think it was at the beginning of this year, they dropped their counterclaim against Mark. But Mark's claim against them was still alive. I mean, there was a hearing last summer where they tried to throw his suit against them out. They were unsuccessful. The judge was going to let two of the causes of action Mark had against them go to trial. So anyway, on February 26th, DNR was able to get one final hearing before the trial where the judge was going to hear yet another motion to dismiss the case. And at the beginning of the hearing, they basically stunned everyone by saying that they no longer had a problem with Mark's pigs. They thought they were legal, and that they were just, willing to let him get back in business. The judge really didn't have too much of a choice. There was no longer any dispute between the parties. Mark had been saying his pigs were legal all along, and all of a sudden the DNR agreed. I mean, it was a cynical manipulation of the judicial process. It was clear the DNR did not want to go to trial. They did not want to have the focus on this declaratory ruling and the fact that it could mean basically being as broad as it was, anything the DNR wanted it to mean on any particular day. They did not want that scrutinized, and in order to avoid trial, they basically gutted their invasive species order, because it clearly says in there that hybrid pigs are illegal under the invasive species order if they're Russian boar hybrids, and that's all Mark has. So it was just a cynical abuse of the judicial process. And on the one hand, there was just I think it helped some 2,000 other heritage breed farms out there, because it's going to be a lot more difficult for DNR to go after them after letting Mark's pigs go and saying, his herd of pigs were legal, but at the same time, Mark was trying to get a legal precedent set that the pigs were, that the invasive species order and the declaratory ruling were invalid, and that DNR need to start all over again, that they're going to issue an invasive species order, issue one where they didn't have all this broad discretion and just basically left farmers in the dark on whether their pigs were legal or not. So that's where it stands right now. I'm not sure if Mark has made up his mind exactly what he's doing yet. I think he wants to still get his day in court on the matter. But here's someone who'd been waiting 2 years for his day in court, was less than 2 weeks away, and DNR pulled the rug on him, out from him, by just coming up with a totally different position on his pigs than they had the prior 2 years.
Because they had this position where they went after him legally and they caused him monetary damage, and I'm sure they caused him time off from work just to have to go to court and all that. Can he go after them now? I mean, if they just suddenly flip-flopped and changed their position, does that not open them up for perhaps some sort of civil lawsuit?
Hopefully it will. Just these states have sovereign immunity to a certain degree. I think the other thing is the state of Michigan is practically broke. I mean, just what we've seen, in some of these other suits, is that the courts are reluctant to turn the taxpayers' money, or just have the state pay out on some cases. But, this is one case where it definitely calls for a payment out to the Baker family, because they've gone through just all kinds of hardship, and it's just taken a huge chunk out of their business the last couple of years. And if the state had taken this position they had at the February 26th hearing 2 years ago, none of this ever would have happened.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked, because it's obviously, any judge, I could see how your point about, the judge is reluctant to charge that to the taxpayers, but any judge with even some semblance of fairness is going to look at this case. This isn't like a frivolous lawsuit where it's just someone suing the city because, they're mad and they want to make a quick buck, and they figure the city or their insurance company will pay out. In this case, or a county or a state. In this case, this is an agency that literally cost this man money and a lot of undue stress. He should at least get the money back that he had to pay out in legal fees plus whatever he lost.
Well, and the danger of this order is that right now, it's been in effect about 2 years now, And the only farmers, they've countersued Mark and the only other farmer who wound up suing them over the constitutionality of the order. Just the trouble is, this is the way they're interpreting the order now, but that declaratory ruling and the invasive species order are still out there, and say there's an outbreak of brucellosis or some other kind of disease among a small number of pigs, they can just use this declaratory ruling to start depopulating herds. I mean, nothing's happened right now, but I mean, there's a precedent for what happened, something similar to the hoof and mouth disease 10 years ago or so over in Britain, where thousands of cattle were needlessly slaughtered. So what the Michigan Department of Agriculture actually had a state veterinarian testify at a hearing a couple of years ago that he did not believe pigs could be raised in the outdoors without being susceptible for disease. So that provided some insight into their thinking, and that's right up the Michigan pork producers' alley. I mean, they represent the indoor operations, the confined animal feeding operations, and it's an opportunity for them to increase their market share and gain greater control over the genetics of the pigs.
I wonder what is going to happen in the future if they're going to, like you said, that thing is still out there. They really haven't changed anything. I mean, their opinion of it changed, but there's really nothing other than, this decision on paper. There's really not more than that. I mean, that is, setting precedent, but still, I could foresee thugs coming out and the thugs in uniform coming out and causing issue, and it be leading to a protracted court battle for somebody else in the future, if perhaps all these farmers and people don't get together and battle this and push that it gets changed completely once and for all.
Right, and the DNR isn't like your typical Department of Agriculture, which you'd think would usually have jurisdiction over something like this. I mean, the Department of Agriculture deals with farmers. The DNR deals with hunters. So they're a little more trigger happy than your typical inspector you typically have with an enforcement action coming from the Department of Agriculture. I mean, unfortunately, there have been a couple of newspaper stories about Mark that have basically tried to portray him as this gun-wielding radical out there. And it's what happens in these enforcement actions sometimes is you get these people who aren't that familiar with the case. They start doing research. They see a story like that, and they get more aggressive because of it. So it's overall, I think the press has been fair, but you still have stories like this which are completely inaccurate and just not fair to the family at all.
How we have about 2.5 minutes before we go to break, but how has his family been holding up? I mean, obviously this has to be very stressful on them. Are they glad that this is at least at least a precedent has been set, and even though he hasn't gotten a chance to have his day in court, are they glad that there's at least some bit of stress off their shoulders at this point?
Well, I mean, he'd be the one to speak to that. His wife, Jill, wrote something on their website after, which just indicated they had mixed feelings about it. I mean, on the good side, they have been declared by the DNR and this judge's ruling to be legal, where they would be able to use the USDA slaughterhouse again. So increasing the markets for their business. But at the same time, just the DNR caused them a lot of suffering over the 2 years. I mean, they could have quit a long time ago, but they stuck with it, trying to get their day in court. And DNR just manipulated the process and denied them that day to just avoid having a trial on the merits of the declaratory ruling. Just the other thing that's disturbing is that since the trial, there have been a couple newspaper stories. I think one of them was an AP Wire story, just quoting the press agent for DNR, saying that they still reserve the right to go out at Mark's existing herd and just possibly confiscate or depopulate pigs if they thought one of them violated the Invasive Species Order. Well, that is in direct violation of the judge's order. He dismissed Mark's case with prejudice, meaning the DNR cannot tamper with his existing herd, and yet DNR is saying they still have that right. So it's, again, just shows contempt for our judicial system.
Yeah, it shows complete contempt. I'm going to pause us right there because we got the break sneaking up on us. Ladies and gentlemen, do not go anywhere. This is serious. There is a war on your freedom of choice for food. I mean, your freedom of choice for everything, but what you put in your body should be your choice, not somebody else's. We're going to break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I am talking to Peter Kennedy, President, founding board member of the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. Before we get back into Mark's case and we finish up with that and get into other cases and actually what the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund is, I want Pete to take a second and plug his website and anything else he wants to throw out there, because he's been so gracious to give us his time for an hour here. Pete, go ahead and plug anything that you want to throw out there, your website or anything else.
Okay, thanks, Popeye. People can find out more about our organization by going to www.farmtoconsumer.org. That's www.farmtoconsumer.org. We're a 501c4 nonprofit, just a true grassroots organization. We get no government funding. We sue government agencies. That's part of our work for violation of our members' rights. Most of our funding comes through private individual donations and just membership fees. So it's just the way we work is we might have a farmer throw a small fundraiser for us, just a consumer belonging to nutrition group or something like that throwing a fundraiser for us. So it's we're definitely raise the money to keep us going at the grassroots. So just anyone who's interested in talking, anyone at our organization, myself, anyone else, just about more about our work, can also call our office number. That's 703-208-3276 and 703-208-3276. Appreciate the opportunity to give a plug, Popeye.
No problem. First of all, I want to say thank you, Peter, for taking the time to sit with us tonight and talk to us about this. And thank you for having the courage to stand up to the powers that shouldn't be for people's freedom. I mean, it's very hard to find people that are willing to do that nowadays. So thank you for having the courage to do that for Mark and all these other people. I know that I appreciate it as well as the listeners, and I'm sure the farmers and everybody else does too, and the hunters. So a big thank you to you.
Well, it's the farmers and who are willing to stick their necks out that have the most to lose. I mean, when it's an important issue like this and you have someone like Mark who's willing to take whatever the state throws after him, we try and do what we can to help.
Well, I'm just appreciative of the fact that somebody stands up for these people because, it affects us too. What happens to these farmers also affects us because that is our food supply. And if we don't stand up for their freedoms, by the way, even if you don't like the freedoms of hunters, say you don't agree with hunting or whatnot, if you don't stand up for their freedom and their right to do it, what happens if a right or a freedom that you enjoy starts to get taken away or become infringed? Wouldn't you want them to stand up for you? That's the way this works. That's the way this whole concept of this country and this grand experiment is supposed to work, that we all back each other. Anyway, back to Mark, and then I want to actually pick your brain about the Legal Defense Fund for a minute, because I think it's just a really interesting concept in and of itself. But going to break, you made an interesting statement. You said that even though the judge ruled with prejudice that the DNR could not any longer mess with him, they're saying, we don't really care. We're going to anyway if we choose that. We wake up one morning and say, oh, his pigs are now not in line with the law, and we're going to have to come and take 10 of them and kill them. And they feel that they can do that even though this judge told them, no, you can't do that. That's just incredible.
Right, and there's just other evidence of their attitude was seen there by everyone attending that court hearing. I never really heard anything like that happening, but before the hearing started, this assistant attorney general went over to Mark, where Mark was sitting with his attorney, started getting in his face, and then just started getting into it with the members of the crowd. It was just completely unprofessional conduct, and topped it off at the end of the hearing. One of the things that Mark and his attorney had been worried about was just the Michigan legislature had passed the Court of Claims Act, where anyone suing the state would have to sue in Lansing, which is the capital, and where the agency has a much greater advantage. Unfortunately, for Mark, he was able to keep his case in Missaukee County, but with the stunt DNR pulled, completely changing their position, the judge did dismiss the case, and I think this attorney went up to Mark after the case and said, how do you like your court now? So just, utter contempt for the process, and just this image that the Michigan Attorney General's office in DNR was above it all.
Wow. They actually came up and said that to him at the end of this all?
Yeah, it's just completely unprofessional conduct.
Wow. I mean, that's just blatant, not caring about anything. And you know what? We don't care. We're going to do what we want. We're just a bunch of thugs, basically. I mean, I guess, what does the law mean, right? What is it?
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing with this declaratory ruling. The law can mean anything they want it to be. I mean, right now, they might not be taking action against someone, but the way the law is right now, they can go farm by farm and get depopulation orders. And I mean, what Mark is doing is trying to make sure that does not happen. But just they have the same cynical attitude toward the judicial process as that they did basically in crafting this declaratory ruling and the Invasive Species Order. So it's, just another way to monopolize the genetics, control the food supply. I mean, this does impact consumers' freedom of choice. If this plays out the way the pork producers would like, people have the choice of buying the white pork, the pork raised in confinement operations, and not a whole lot else.
It's just insane. This whole thing is just insane that they even, I mean, how much money do you think, besides not what he lost, how much money do you think they wasted themselves as the agency? How much money do you think they burned up in funding going after him?
Well, quite a bit. I'd say easily six figures of their time. How much in the six figures, I don't know. But another interesting thing to find out would be is DNR funding the state in pursuing this program. They definitely work with them on this group that crafted the Invasive Species Order. But they given any financial contributions to the state to help push this through. So it's, just a classic definition of fascism. Big corporations working with the state to snuff out competition.
And this is definitely not the country that I remember being told about as a child. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, every day you wake up and you look at the news and you see more and more cases like this. Like I mentioned in the opening segue, the raw food collectives in California getting raided at gunpoint. I mean, this is just, and it's food. This is insane. But when do we not realize that this is totally just off the rocker? You know what I mean?
Well, we're just in a position where we can't let an agency like the DNR get away with something like that. I mean, Mark is, along with this other pig farmer suing the DNR, Roger Tarun, and is trying to hold them accountable and trying to change the law so people can actually understand it. They know what it means and are afforded due process, instead of getting in this situation where words and laws mean anything DNR wants them to mean. So I think there are a lot of areas in the local food movement where things are improving. Like you mentioned at the beginning, just our organization has mainly worked on raw milk cases, and you see there hasn't been as much enforcement the last year or so. It's definitely died down from a few years ago when you had that raid in California that you were just describing. But there's still just these other areas like this invasive species order where people need to wake up and just see that their freedom of choice is being taken from them.
Yeah, I think the farmers, the hunters, the foodies, and I mean even the vegans, the people that don't eat meat, okay? You all need to get together. And I know that some people are going to go, I could never get together with someone that raises animals to be slaughtered, for food. Look, whether you realize it or not, you all have the same thing in common. It's called freedom. Big surprise.
Right.
And it's under attack by the very same people. All of your freedoms. So unless you all band together and start sticking together and defending one another, whether you like each other or not, again, that's the way this grand experiment works. We're going to keep having this problem, and it's just going to get worse. So,
right. I mean, that's how these monopolies are created. Just these companies or organizations like the pork producers can't have a monopoly unless they're working with the government, unless they've got the government doing their bidding for them. They can't. There's no way they can get a monopoly through competition. Their product's inferior to the product put out there by Mark Baker and the other farmers. So for the vegans who say, good, we'd like to see these pork producers come out of business, you've got the FDA Food Safety Modernization Act coming up, where FDA is getting much further into regulating produce. I mean, they could be next. You need to fight in all areas of the food freedom of choice arena. There are a number of different ways the government can attack freedom in this area, and just because your ox isn't getting gored this particular time doesn't mean you shouldn't care about it.
Just remember the federal government and the state governments get lobbied by Monsanto on a daily basis for years now to make growing your own vegetables on your backyard, in your backyard garden, or even on like a porch area illegal. They want to make it literally illegal to grow your own food. So just remember, even if you think
Right,
that,
and
to the vegetarians or vegans or anybody, if you don't eat meat and you think, well, it's cool that, I'm glad that those pigs aren't going to get slaughtered. It's not about that. That's like a red herring. It's about your freedom of choice. They're going to come after you too. Trust me, they already are.
right, and Monsanto has done a good job monopolizing the seed supply. This is monopolizing pig genetics. They're both about control. So you don't want to see control in any area of food. You just want the local, you want self-sufficiency in food. You want to get as much of your food as possible produced locally. You don't want to have to rely on imports like the United States seems to do. You'd like to have transparency and traceability in the food system, which is really being able to buy from a farm where you can set foot on it and get an idea of what they're about instead of buying some product where the ingredients were made in maybe 8 different countries, 10 different states. You want to be able to buy a hamburger where the meat came from 1 cow instead of 1,000 cows in number of countries, again, number of states.
Yeah, and it also not only does it give you more control over your food and more knowledge of actually what you're eating, but it also supports the local economy. So it's a win-win. I mean, you're getting healthier, cleaner food for yourself, and you're supporting your local economy, and everybody's happy. It's that happy ending.
There's a greater multiplier effect, I think, when you have a prosperous local agricultural system. The dollar turns over more in the community, creates more work. Is what you've happened with the commodification of agriculture and these monopolies in the different areas of agriculture. Is it's just depopulated the countryside in a lot of areas. And that's what the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Association is about, is that we'd like as many of these small farmers to get out of the commodity system as possible and just have the right to direct market the products of the farm to the consumer and have diversified farms where they're not relying on just one crop for a living.
We got about 10 minutes left. I want to focus on that right now. Where did this idea for the Legal Defense Fund come from? Like, when did it start, and how did the idea, where did it formulate? Where did it come from?
Well, I mean, there are really 2 food systems right now, Popeye. There's the conventional or industrial food system, which has almost all the food dollar, and then the local food system, which is growing but still has a small percentage of the food dollar. And really the food at the center of the confrontation between the contention between the 2 systems is raw milk. Raw milk is kind of the gateway, from what we've seen, to the farm. I mean, it's what gets people on the farm in the first place. Once they're there, they might buy meat, poultry, eggs, and produce, but just from what we've seen, it's what gets people on the farm initially more than any other food. Same thing with conventional grocery stores or supermarkets. Milk's a perishable product. It's what gets people into the supermarket, and once they're there, they'll buy other products as well. So, we were started mainly in response to these enforcement actions against raw milk producers going back about 10 years or so. And we started in 2007. Just our founder, Sally Fallon Morell, is the president of Weston Price, which is one of the biggest raw milk advocacy groups. So she saw these enforcement actions, saw there was an unlevel playing field, just realized these agencies would be able to drag these farmers through these administrative judicial proceedings, deplete them of their resources, and legal defense fund couldn't take care of all the expenses they had, but they could take care of the legal expenses, which is a major expense. And typically when we represent someone, they don't, they pay us little or nothing beyond their membership fee. So what we were able to do in a lot of these cases is just level the playing field, where the state was not able to bully farmers and drive them out of business. Just one of the biggest cases we had was last year when we represented this Wisconsin dairy farmer, Vernon Hirschberger, who was charged with 4 criminal misdemeanor counts for violating the state food and dairy code. And I talked to people who estimated the state paid, maybe up to $500,000 trying to prosecute him. They had 7,000 pages worth of documents. They had hired this computer expert over a 3-year period to go through a computer of Vernon Hirschberger's that they confiscated in a raid. And they, just as they got closer to the trial, they just were trying anything they could to wear him down. There was one pretrial hearing after another over any number of issues, and when it was all said and done, he was acquitted on 3 of the 4 counts by a jury of his peers, and was able to keep on feeding his community like he had been. So this is one of the better examples of how we're able to take on the government bullies and protect the people we're representing.
That's really what they are. They're just bullies. I mean, there's really no rhyme or reason. I would understand.
Yeah, and I think that's something Mark Baker has brought out. I mean, it just seems like it's to a point where the state really doesn't know what to do with them. They're not used to someone standing up to them, and they've really just done some things like trying to find someone who's never really broken any law other than allegedly this invasive species order, $700,000. It's just a sign that they're not handling a situation real well where someone is actually standing up to them.
Well, they're handling a bunch of children. I mean, it's almost, it's like I could understand if they were following, the letter of the letter of the law, and I'm doing air quotes when I say that, whatever's on the books, right, according to what it is on the books. But they had a different stance. They were going after him for any little thing. Their reasons could be for whatever, and then suddenly they were challenged. They didn't know what to do, so they changed their opinion. But then they still flaunted in his face and like, well, even though we changed our opinion and the judge ruled on it, we're still going to screw with you if we want. Like they still got to be that 11-year-old tough guy kid that's trying to pick on you on the playground, and you stood up to him, and as you're walking off like, yeah, he's still, talking to you. Oh, you'll see, I'll get you, you and your friends. I mean, that's basically what they're acting like. They're acting like a bunch of 11-year-old children. There's no reason once you go past the law and the rules and even a judge's ruling, and you're still pushing the issue and harassing this guy, it comes to a point where you have to ask yourself, why are these people doing that? I mean, why? Are they getting off on their little petty power? You know what I mean?
The other thing is that they really disrespected the judicial system, where the way they pulled off that dismissal. And, I mean, the judicial system can get their measure of revenge for them, too, through this judge by awarding damages to the Baker family and just sending a message to the government agencies that they can't get away with this kind of thing. It's unfortunately, you don't see that all that often, but you've got an opportunity right here to just hold the agency to a higher level of accountability by giving a damage award out. against them for what they've done.
Yeah, I agree. They need to set a precedent and set an example, just like they would do with one of these farmers or hunters, and the state agency would go after them and set an example, for all the others. Well, it should be done in reverse on them, because, like the old saying goes, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. It ain't right if they can get away with it, but the same thing that they get away with scot-free, somebody else, Joe Citizen, would be put in jail for the rest of his life and harassed or have his business ruined. It's just not right. We got about a minute left, Peter. Really quick, again, throw out the website for everybody, and I urge people, if you have a few bucks and you want to donate to a good cause, here's a definite good cause. The money's going to go to help farmers, help hunters, help people out, help food freedom. So really quick, go ahead and throw out that information for the website again, Peter.
Okay, sure. It's www.farmtoconsumer.org. That's www.farmtoconsumer.org. And again, if anyone wants to talk to anyone about the organization, get more information over the phone, they can call us at 703-208-3276. That's 703-208-3276. Again, appreciate the opportunity to plug the organization, Papa.
No problem. I really appreciate you coming on tonight, Peter, and discussing Mark's case, discussing the Legal Defense Fund, and discussing food freedom in general. And I also applaud you for having the courage to stand up to these petty tyrants. It really does take courage to stand up in times like these. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And I know the listeners and the farmers and the hunters appreciate it as well, sir.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on.
No problem. Talk to you soon. There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Peter Kennedy. I urge you to check out the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. I want to make sure I get that right. Give them the proper respect that they are due. Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. If you can donate, ladies and gentlemen, there's a good cause to donate to. They help these farmers fight food freedom. Again, vegetarians, vegans, meat eaters, we're all on the same team. I'm an omnivore. I eat everything. I like salads, but I also like a steak once in a while. We all need to come together and realize that food freedom is food freedom. Doesn't matter if you like eating veggies or if you like eating a cow. Freedom is freedom. Get it?
This is Sparta!